So this is a brief video to address the question of whether there are techniques in therapy or therapy-informed coaching that are 100% reliable for what they are meant to do. A technique used in therapy most of the time is a technique inviting you to introspect on something in your own experience. So long as you can look at your own experience without so much discomfort that you have to say, oh, I can't look at that, then this technique will generally be reliable, mostly without fault. And there's a specific way to do it. And if you want to use it for yourself just as an introspection technique, then you're more than welcome to do that. If you encounter resistance or discomfort, if you're looking into an issue that's been with you for a long time or that's particularly deep, then I would recommend just treating yourself with compassion and not trying to force anything. If this doesn't work, then maybe reach out to a professional to see if they can help you with it. Sometimes we have resistance to doing work on ourselves for the fact that we don't feel safe enough to know something, either something that we've experienced or something about ourselves like low self-worth. We really don't want to have a full-on encounter with or shame or something like that. So in any case, what I would recommend is listen to the technique first and then see if it resonates with you. And if it does, then this can be an extremely effective way of getting insight on something that is out of your awareness that is creating problems in your life. Okay. It comes from Coherence Therapy and it's called Symptom Deprivation. So when we're talking about symptoms, we are talking about symptoms of suffering that have their origins in emotional learning. Emotional learning means early childhood events, things that we've absorbed from our culture. They can be learnings that we internalize at any point in our lives that live at more of a feeling level that is nonverbal. Maybe some component of what we've internalized, whether it's from, again, our family, our environment, community, what have you. Some of that's conscious and some of it's not. For the part of those learnings that's not conscious, that lives outside of conscious awareness, what that means is we can have something that's bothering us, that's affecting our behavior, and we don't fully know what that's about, right? Let me give an example of something that affects our behavior that is pretty well integrated. And if we had to give it words, we could probably do that pretty easily. Let's say you step in front of a car and reflexively you jump back because a car coming towards you and you jump back from that because part of you non-verbally implicitly knows what the car is, what it means that it's speeding towards you, how it's dangerous, how you could be injured or killed, and all of that without thinking about it verbally, right? But after you jump back from the car, if somebody asked you about, oh, hey, why'd you jump back from that car? Let's say an alien landed and was curious about the human experience. You could tell that alien why it was that you jumped back from the car with no issue, right? So we could say that there's that primal feeling level of the mind that is involved with helping us survive and get the love and connection that we need, which is also tied into survival on some level, right? All of that exists at a feeling level of the mind that is there before we can even express language verbally. It's a very primal level of the mind. And it's there to help us survive. We might have learned in our early childhood environment that the way to survive in our family, to avoid harsh punishment, is to get straight A's, for example, or to excel at sports or other activities in a way that is almost an impossibly high standard. But if we got to maybe somewhere close to that standard, we would avoid punishment, and maybe we would get rewarded for that also. So that was the way that we survived in our family. And so we might develop learnings about the standard to which we need to hold ourselves to that is going to help us survive. And that imprint of, okay, I need to do this in order to survive, that extends beyond the context in which it originated. It's not just that our parents told us this, or our caretakers, or our school, or whatever. We can carry these learnings later into life, and they become generalized to all circumstances. So let's say we're in college, or we're an entrepreneur, or in another context where we're not helpless in the way that we were as children anymore. We can negotiate our own boundaries. We have more freedom. We're adults. We have autonomy in a way that we didn't as children. And we have resources, especially spiritual and community resources, that we didn't oftentimes as children. Now, let's say we're out of that initial circumstance, but the learning from that circumstance is still intact. So the way that could show up is, for example, procrastination. Let's say we're doing an assignment or we're working on a project. We're doing something that we actually like, and we notice this tendency to procrastinate, right? Now, when it's a symptom like procrastination, where we find ourselves like, I'm just going to do this other thing. I'm just going to look at cat videos. I'm just going to watch video games on YouTube or whatever it is, right? When we do that is something that our mind is actively doing, okay? And if we have trouble reining that in, what that could mean, if it's not just something that happens every once in a while, it's really not a big deal. It doesn't really affect our lives in any meaningful way. If we have procrastination, that's really a kind of indecision that's difficult to resolve, right? And affects our life on many different levels. What that generally means is that there's one of those imprints, schemas, as to how we need to survive, how we need to avoid danger or get love or some mix, or avoid disconnection, whatever it is. There is some protocol for how to do that is out of conscious awareness that downstream is creating this symptom or giving rise to the symptom of procrastination. So if we want to do the work of resolving this imprint, what that involves is making the underlying issue conscious. Doesn't mean we have to explore all of our past in order to do this. It doesn't mean that. What it means is we have to identify the specific learning or the specific thing that we internalized about how we need to survive that is happening in the present, that is active in the present. We learned it in the past. The things that we learn, think about something that we learn like this. A statement like, I can only get love if I am perfect, or if I do things perfectly. And let's say that there's a switch next to that statement that is turned to true. Okay. Now, that statement, or that statement, let's call it a feeling knowing, something that was true. We feel like we know that it's true because it was true in our early environment, right? So the switch next to that is set to true. Now, it's set to true at a feeling level of being that is out of verbal awareness. So what we need to do first, before turning the switch to false, is bring that into conscious awareness, and then it can meet our integrated adult understanding of the world. A lot of the time, that's what it takes for an integration to happen and for some transformation of that symptom to happen, or some transformation of that schema. Okay. And the first step in doing that is peeling back the layers that are showing up more consciously. And let's say if procrastination is showing up more consciously, right? Let's say, again, we have that project that we want to move forward with. We notice ourselves procrastinating as a general pattern that's getting in the way of our thriving. And we can ask ourselves, okay, if I just move forward with my project, if I just imagine that for a minute and feel what happens when I imagine it, what does that feel like? What, if anything, feels uncomfortable? Okay. That's a form of symptom deprivation, because we're taking away, we're imagining ourselves without the symptom of procrastination. Procrastination is a symptom that is a solution to some sort of deeper anxiety or discomfort or fear or whatever, right? It helps us not be viscerally aware of whatever that emotional suffering beneath the surface is. So without the solution of procrastination to that deeper level of suffering, it allows for that deeper level of suffering to unpack in verbal conscious awareness without needing to analyze what it is. It allows that visceral feeling, or that visceral feeling knowing that's inside of us, to come into verbal awareness without any mediation or analysis. It gives us an actual means to know what it is that's uncomfortable that we're trying to avoid. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if I were to just move forward with this project, I get this sense that it needs to be perfect or else. Yeah, there's really like a sense of threat there. I know that's not the case. I know that nobody's really threatening me about it, but this really feels primal. This feels like I'm in danger. Wow. Yeah, and then memories might start to unpack and we can start to explore what the rules were, right? That maybe there were some impossibly high standards that we were up against, or like an unspecified high standard. And if we didn't meet that unspecified high standard, or at least try to, we'd get in a lot of trouble. We'd get punished. We'd feel disconnection. We'd feel exiled in some ways from the family or family system, whatever. Point being that this kind of discovery technique, or a technique that helps us uncover an unconscious level of suffering and begin to put it into conscious awareness so that we can get at the deeper level schema that's creating the suffering at the surface, right? The technique of symptom deprivation is exceptionally reliable. So long as we have the ability to know what our emotional inner state is without feeling overwhelmed, and so long as we're willing to look at it, this technique approaches reliability in virtually every case that I can think of, except ones where somebody is just uncomfortable knowing their inner experience. If a person is overwhelmed by all the trauma that they're sitting on, it makes more sense to do resourcing techniques and that sort of thing to make sure there's enough safety to do this process. Most cases, most of the time, this kind of technique is pretty innocuous to just know what the suffering is. Because also, a lot of times we think, okay, I don't want to re-traumatize somebody. If you're a practitioner, I certainly don't want to be re-traumatized. But no, we don't need to re-traumatize ourselves in order to resolve something. What we do need to do is know what it is in the present that is keeping us in a suffering pattern. And for example, what could be happening in the present is, again, that feeling knowing that's out of awareness, where the switch is switched to true, right? I can only be loved if I'm perfect. Once that's integrated into conscious awareness, sometimes a person has done enough work on themselves so that there's an integration, and that's in that kind of, it fizzles, and then there's a shift. You could say the switch goes from true to false. I have plenty of experience where I know that I'm lovable if I'm not perfect. I felt plenty of connection in my past with people that didn't demand that I was perfect. And there might be a lot of grief, right? There might be a lot of grief that, oh my God, I've been holding myself to the same standard as a means of relating to dad or to mom for so long. I've never wanted to let that go. And I guess I've just got to let that go and know that connection with mom and dad is just not going to happen in that way. And it just might happen like that as a cascade of deep insight and integration. And that in itself might transform the issue. It might happen that there's more resistance, right? Where it's, yeah, I don't know. Part of me, I get it. Intellectually, I get it that there have been people in my life who connect to me without demanding that I'm perfect. And yeah, I get that. And that doesn't do it. And it means that there's just something else that's holding that schema together, or holding it intact, keeping the switch set to true. And we don't know what it is yet, right? So anyway, the purpose of this video, I don't want to go too deep into other coherence therapy techniques that are meant to dissolve the core level of the schema. If we want basic insight on what it is that's driving, for example, a procrastination symptom, a symptom where we feel like we're actively suppressing an emotion, for example, any symptom where you can identify what your mind is actively doing, okay, then you can use this symptom deprivation practice if that feels intuitively okay for you. Okay, so what I advised at the beginning was to watch this first and to see if it would feel comfortable for you or resonate with you, and then you can try it on yourself. Okay, this is not meant to be a substitution of working with a skilled practitioner. So if anybody, sits down, you sit down with your journal or in your meditation practice and you're thinking, okay, I noticed myself procrastinating about this. What would happen if I didn't? And then you start to remember things, and then it just gets really uncomfortable all of a sudden. That might mean that you could benefit from some support. So I would invite anybody that feels, if you do this technique and you start to feel like, okay, this is getting into territory that just feels too difficult to sit with, then that's fine. That's actually normal. If you feel like something is too much for you, then I would recommend seeing a skilled practitioner who can help get you through that experience and help you go through all the phases such that you can transform the underlying schema or suffering pattern. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. So this is my answer to, are there techniques that are 100% effective in therapy? And I think that this is the closest thing to that. Nothing is 100% all the time, right? But this general process of looking at, without trying to override the discomfort, and an override would be like, if we say, okay, how would it feel if I move forward with this task? Oh yeah, I'd feel so productive. Okay, let's lean into that. You'd be really productive. Great, let's do it. Let's go for it. Let's just set our 15-minute timer and get in the groove, and yeah, we'll play some music. Sometimes that can work for like emergency first aid, but it doesn't work for resolving the root level of the symptom. If you want to resolve the root level of the symptom, the first step is to look at the suffering pattern that your mind is actively doing. Procrastination, keeping yourself parked in some emotional experience like anxiety because you don't want to experience anger. Trying to think of other ones. Keeping ourselves parked in low self-worth. You can think about low self-worth as like this jacket that you're wearing that you've had for a good deal of your life. And low self-worth is something that you can think of it as a view that we're actively holding. If you were to take that jacket of low self-worth off, how would that feel? And you might be surprised, right? If you really allow yourself to feel what it is that you become exposed to once that more surface level symptom is put to the side, right? If we inquire, okay, if I were without this view of low self-worth, if I didn't keep myself parked in anxiety, if I didn't procrastinate, how would that feel? And if you start to feel discomfort, tension in your body, just hover on what that is. You can just allow it to come into your awareness and see if you can give it a voice. And then that in itself often provides relief because it gives us self-knowledge about what the real issue is without any analysis. It gives us a direct knowing, which gives us a deeper sense of autonomy and agency over the issue I guess a knowledge that the issue like isn't coming from outside of us in some way. Nobody's beaming suffering symptoms into our mind. It's something that's happening internally. If you have an issue where you know it's coming from early childhood learning, that situation is really not present in the present. And you know that something that you're dealing with is a remnant of the past. It's an imprint that's still affecting your life. Then this technique can be very helpful. And so I hope this video has been informative. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to put them in the comments. Thank you.